I'm going to record. So we're going to talk about color now. And here we go. Beautiful. So I'm going to leave here. I'm going to leave my slideshow not full screen so that I can point to things with my cursor. We're talking about color overall. So we're likely all very, very familiar with the color wheel, but just as a bit of a refresher, if this is the color wheel, we talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So the primary colors would be yellow, red, and blue, right? So those are colors that cannot be produced by mixing other colors together. You can't make a red, right? You have to have red. You can't make a yellow. You need to have yellow. But I will just say right now that when we're talking about the color wheel, we're talking about light wavelengths, like wavelengths of light and how the light is being reflected back, the wavelengths of light that are being reflected back. That's what creates color in our eyes. But when we're working with art materials, as you all found when you were working with your color material in your sketchbook, of course, you're not working with light. You're working with pigment in a dry form like an oil pastel or a chalk pastel. So things change a little bit because the pigments are all made from, you know, their own chemical compounds and they have their own way of reacting. So when I'm talking about the color wheel right now, I'm talking about wavelengths of color. I'm not talking about, you know, whether you're mixing a cadmium red with a cadmium yellow or whether you're mixing a cobalt blue with a cadmium red, right? Okay, so just to be clear about that. So we got our primary colors, and then we have secondary colors, which of course are orange, purple, and green. So, you know, this is very, very basic, but if we take our primary yellow and blue and we mix them together with light, we get the perfect green. Again, we all know with using actual pigment, that may or may not be the case. Now, tertiary colors are these intermediary, they're sometimes called intermediary colors, these ones here. So this would be like yellow-green, and this would be blue-green. So it's the primary and the secondary mixed together gets you the tertiary color. And then when we talk about hue, we're just talking about that generic name for a color. It's like everything that you would think of as being red. Red is the hue. That's the word we're using to talk about that. So this is a Barnett Newman piece called Voice of Fire. And the major painting purchased by Canada. Huge amount of controversy over this painting because of the price of it. There's only 3 stripes of color is what they said at the time. So there you go. To see it in person is pretty fantastic because it's humongous.
I remember that.
Do you remember that, Jewel?
Yeah, that was centennial year.
Yeah.
And it was just huge.
You know, it's funny, Barnett Newman, he's not even Canadian. I take issue with that more than taking issue with the fact that it's a painting.
Yeah, me too.
Goodness. So anyway, this hue.
Yeah, I was really disappointed that.
Go ahead, Jewel. You were disappointed
that they did that instead of using a Canadian paint.
Yeah.
They used an American in 1967 when it should have been really, really important that it's
like a celebration of Canadian talent, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the hues in this piece are blue and red. So when we speak about hue, that's what we're talking about. And then value and color are so linked, so linked. So value, of course, we talk about tints and shades in terms of color. So adding degrees of black and or white to color creates tints and shades of that particular color. You can modify color in all kinds of ways, but this is one way. And in drawing, we start by just drawing in black and white because it's crucial to understand the value relationships in drawing before adding color in, because we don't want to forget about the value relationships when we have color. If you do, the drawing tends to fall apart. So you need to simultaneously be looking at the hue, but also be looking at the value that that hue is containing. And we'll look at that together. So this would be, of course, blue with tints and shades added in. And if we talk about high key color, that's anything in this range here. So really, really bright, that's high key color. And then these ones down here where you start adding black, that's low key color. So things that are darker, they're not, it's not black, but it's dark value hue. Okay, so then when we talk about complementary colors, we're talking about colors that are opposite from one another on the color wheel. And you may find it handy to have a color wheel or even to create a color wheel in your sketchbook just to have it on hand to help you remember the relationships on the color wheel. So yellow would be complementary to purple in the same way that yellow orange would be complementary to blue purple. So whatever is directly across is a complementary color. And complementary color schemes, oh, let me just go forward here. Yeah, we'll talk about complementary color schemes in a little while. But for now, let's just say complementary colors are things that are opposite on the color wheel. So then you can also neutralize color. And as a painter and somebody who draws in color as well, I feel like this is one of the most useful things that you can learn. So you can take the complements, right? Like red and green are complementary colors. And if you mix together red and green, what happens is that the color becomes neutralized. So it becomes desaturated. And we're going to talk about saturation in a moment. But you can see in all of these cases where the complements are mixed together, you get something that's more neutral looking. And it's so helpful when you're making drawings and paintings to be able to do that. Now, within each of these examples, usually you'll find when you're blending color and mixing color that one of the pigments becomes dominant. So in this situation with the red and the green, red is always going to be a more dominant pigment than green. So for example, you would use a lot less red than you would green in order to achieve a true neutral, or else it always looks kind of red. Have you guys experienced that before? One color just like totally overtakes the other color. That's just a matter of knowing what the pigment does. So when we talk about intensity or saturation or chroma, we're basically talking about how bright or pure the color is. So chroma is the purity of a hue or its freedom from white, black, or gray, or wavelengths of other colors. So like as pure as you possibly can get. And then intensity is the saturation, strength, or purity of a hue. So a vivid color is of high intensity and a dull color is of low intensity, or we might say low saturation. I would say desaturated, actually. That's the term I would use, desaturated. So if we look at this painting by Matisse, Red Studio, this is like high saturated color. That red is really bright, although there is something in it that makes it just a little desaturated. Do you see that? Do you see how it's not like the reddest red you could possibly have?
Almost like a red ochre or something.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So the red is very bright, but it's still a little neutralized, like it's been modified. So it's not pure saturated red, it's modulated in some way. This, I would say, there we go. There we've got that high saturation. But overall, I would still, if I was to think of this painting, I would still say this is highly saturated. I mean, this is a lot of so much color. Matisse, so much color, right? Bridget Riley.
So when you talk about chroma,
Yeah.
when you talk about chroma in this picture, would you say that the only true color would be the red in that picture that you showed us last?
Yeah.
In the reclining figure, I think it is.
Yeah, that's right. I would say that would be the most pure chroma in the picture, right? Because it's like the reddest red that's been not manipulated in any kind of way. But I would say in the grand scheme of things, when we look at other images, overall, this is still a really highly saturated painting. Has a lot of color in it. But yes.
Okay, so the difference between
saturation and chroma.
Saturation is intense.
They're all kind of interchangeable.
Are they the same?
They are for all intensive purposes. So if we're talking about the intensity of a color, I would say that this is very intense, this red, but I would also say that it's not the highest chroma possible, right? Because this is the sort of highest chroma. It's still intense. And I would even say that it's still very saturated, even though it has been modulated in some way. Okay.
It seems to me more saturated than the true red. Does that make sense?
Well, it is, it has a lot of pigment in it, certainly, but is it true saturation in terms of the wavelength of red color? Well, it has been manipulated. So if we look at this, well, of course, I don't have a definition for saturation up there, but if you think about chroma being the purity of the hue, you can tell that the red in this painting has been manipulated. And my guess is that the red has just a touch of a green added to it, actually. Okay, I'm going to move on, Jewel, but you can ask, if you need to ask another question, go right ahead, okay? So Bridget Riley, I would say that this is really high intensity. Like my eyeballs are, you know, bugging out just looking at this image. Bridget Riley's a painter from the UK, and she does a lot of op art, so optical illusion in art. And, you know, in terms of chroma, again, this right here, that is red, right? Like that is very, very red. Now, would this be blue, like the bluest blue? I'm not sure. I mean, it all seems like it's been manipulated, I would say, except this red, but I would still say high intensity. So let me show you something that has very low intensity or low saturation.
Oh.
So this is a Wayne Thiebaud image. We've looked at Wayne Thiebaud quite a bit. And he did this whole series of like sweets and cakes. Good, so great. And when we look at this painting, I mean, at first you think, oh, it's white. And then you really look at it, and is anything really white in the image? It all has a bit of color to it, but it's very low saturation, right? It's a lot of tints and shades. So we have, you know, this color here, which is like a light blue. And then we have the color that is used in the line work, which is sort of like an orangey red color, sanguine almost. And then we have a violet color. We have a blue green that's really, really light in here. We have this buttery yellow color in here. Then we have, yeah, like again, the violet, but it looks like there's been more black added in there. So overall, a very, very low saturation image, but still full of color. Okay. And one more, this Ong painting, The Bather, absolutely beautiful sense of color, all very desaturated. So if I look at this, you know, beautiful olive colored, this green colored drapery that we have in here, I would call that green, right? The hue green, but it's certainly not green like the green we were looking at on the color wheel. I mean, that green has been manipulated a lot, probably with by mixing in other colors, using the complement quite a bit. And even all of this, you know, all the skin tone in here, it becomes sort of the brightest thing, the skin tone, but it's still very desaturated. I mean, it's not like high intensity. And you'll find that actually, if you're doing a lot of naturalistic painting, often, or drawing, like drawing with color, often things are quite desaturated. Okay, so one concept that I wanted to bring up with you is the idea of warm versus cool. And sometimes we talk about it in terms of plastic color. So plastic meaning movable, or it moves in space. So again, Bridget Riley. So when you look at this painting, what is advancing towards you?
The dark lines.
For you, the dark lines advance?
Dark lines.
The red and the orange and the pink.
Yeah, for me, it's the red, the orange, and the pink. I can actually see what you're talking about, though, Kate, in terms of those dark lines also becoming really like a focal point because of their difference in value, right? But for me, those orange, especially as I look at it, those orange lines almost hover in front of the other colors. What were you going to say, Jewel?
It's like it's waving. You go up and down in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a wild optical illusion, really. And then you can see, okay, so you can see that right in here, this is higher intensity color. And then look at on the edges. Look at how that color has been desaturated. And the longer you look at it, do you feel like it kind of comes out like this? Because more desaturated color will fall back, warmer color comes forward, and cooler color comes back. So the blue colors are receding backwards. The orange color and the like pinky red color is advancing forward, but then the effect is less great on the sides where it has become more desaturated. Whew. Here's another Bridget Riley. How about this one? Let your eyes adjust to it for a minute.
The red, a red orange.
Whew.
Pops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's probably a cadmium red, and it just pushes forward.
Complementary.
And the longer you look at it, do you start to see a line between the red and the light blue area? I see a dark line right here. Do you guys see that? And a dark line right here?
I can now, but
Yeah.
I didn't
And
before.
I also see a lighter line right here.
Yeah.
Do you guys see that? So that has to do with the orangeness of that red and the blueness of the blue. And those two things coming together, they're creating this competing contrast that's happening, and it's causing havoc in your eye. Your poor rods and cones are trying to fire and figure that out, and it is just bumping up against one another. There is not a line there, but our brains make a line there, basically. But again, red coming forward, blue receding back. And then that yellow, what happens with that yellow space on the side? It's like a buttery yellow, this guy. Where is that sitting in space?
I feel like it kind of gets lost.
Yeah,
Like I didn't even notice it until you mentioned it. Like my eyes lead to the red and purples and then
right.
just falls
Isn't that
down.
funny? I think it's a compositional device too, so that your eye doesn't just totally fall off the picture plane there. So it's, we're so intensely looking at this area. And then this little piece here, I would just fall right out of this blue. I'm being led right off the page. And then this stops me from coming off the page. And for me, that buttery yellow sort of floats in the middle. So it competes with the that kind of lilac color, the light violet color. But for me, it kind of comes forward from that just a little bit. Okay, now to talk about plastic color in a way that isn't op art, and coming back to the portrait, when we look at this painting by Manet, Manet is using a classical color scheme where he's looking at the color of the light. And in this case, the color of the light is coming from, I'm guessing, a window. So the light color is cool. So this is a cool kind of peachy color. Look at how warm this shadow is. Isn't that beautiful? It's red. I mean, there's a lot of red happening in that shadow. And the green color that's all in here is also very warm. So in a portrait, if you look at the color of your light, if the light is cool, then the shadows will be warm. And that will create that plastic effect that has more of a three-dimensionality to it. Let's look at another example. This is Jenny Saville Rosetta 2. So now the light source is very warm. So this is like incandescent light. That's like what I'm under right here. So if I have a warm light source coming at me, then the shadows will be cool. So let's look at this shadow right here. Look at that. And look at this kind of teal color that's being used underneath. It's very effective. And, you know, the coloration becomes, it's super believable. And yet when you look at each of these color strokes individually, they are very subjective. Yet it totally works. So the roundness is happening because the yellows are projecting forward and the blue, gray, greeny colors are going backwards. Okay, when we talk about local color, we're talking about what the thing, the name of the color that you would describe. So Henry Rousseau is a great painter for using local color. Here's a tree with bananas. Bananas are yellow. All of the bananas in this painting are yellow. Here is foliage. The foliage is green. All of the foliage is going to be green, right? Local color. It becomes very simplistic though, when you're using purely local color and you're not observing the different colors that are within each thing. And when you're not looking at color that becomes reflected and bounced back onto the object. So the fact that these bananas are yellow and I don't see any of the green from around the bananas within the bananas, it kind of makes it look, yeah, simplistic, and also separates the bananas from the picture plane. So the bananas really stand out as their own thing. They don't necessarily look integrated within the image. Subjective color is when you just do what you like with the color. It does not have to do with what the thing actually is. So here's Dana Schutz, who's a contemporary painter out of New York. And this is Reclining Nude, Frank from Observation from 2002. She did this whole series of Frank, who she imagined to be the last man on earth. So look at Frank's poor skin tone there. Good God, Frank, you need some sunscreen. It's terrible, right? So I also want you to just observe how this pink color here, this super hot pink, this is actually a cool pink color. Do you see how that pink is cooler? And now look at this color, really red. So she's using that idea of plastic color as well. So even though it's super subjective, we're still seeing the blueness come through in this pink and then the warm tones coming through. And she, unlike Henry Rousseau, she is doing a bit of reflected color. So do you see down here how we have this kind of ochre color? That's reflected light that's coming in from the stuff around him.
Right.
Wacky. She's
Wow.
a wacky one.
Neat.
Okay, so complementary colors. If we work within, I'm going to shift now to talk about different color systems that you could use within your drawings. So one is using complementary colors as a color system. So again, complementary yellow to purple, or red to green, orange to blue. Those are your most standard ones. And here is an image just using the red and green color combination. So if you're using complementary colors, complements are opposite, and opposites give you like tension and excitement. So if you have a complementary color system, you're wanting to make something look exciting. So when I look at this painting, it's really moving and optically, yeah, very exciting because of the complementary colors being used in it. Here's a much more desaturated painting, Van Gogh. We've all seen this image. Have you ever noticed that it's a complementary color system? So we have dominant color of blue, and then look at the orange. Look at the orange in his beard and the orange in his hair and a little bit in his eyebrows. So that complement is making him look even more like troubled or excited or tense. It's creating tension in the image because the background, I mean, it's all swirly and light, you know, very, very calm. And then that beard just brings you right back. It's a very exciting element. You can also use a double complement system. Sometimes it's called a tetrad. I found the idea of a tetrad to be like overly confusing. So if we look at this tetradic diagram here, they're saying that basically you're creating a rectangle within your color wheel. But it would be much easier to just say you're using two complements, green and red and blue and orange at the same time. So this would be a double complement or tetradic system up here. And then if we go to yellow and violet with green and red, that becomes another double complement. And then these are tetradic complements and more tetradic complements. Okay, so meaning 4, right? Here's a double complement image. So the primary colors that we see are green and red, followed by violet and yellow. So those are the dominant colors. There's a little bit of everything in there, and you're not going to be strict. You're not going to say like, okay, well, I'm only using 4 colors. Those are the 4 most dominant colors within the color system. And would you say this is high or low chroma or saturation? What about saturation?
Hi.
Hi.
High. Yeah. He's painting a lot out of the tube, right? It's modulated, but in general, wow, like, whew, that's a lot of color. And then this here would be another double complement, Peter Doig. So we've got red and green, very obvious. And then we actually have the tetradic. So we have kind of orange yellow with a blue violet in the background. So again, double complement is giving you a lot of excitement, I'm going to talk about split complements. I don't really expect you to use this. In fact, all of this, I don't necessarily expect, I want you to know about it and be able to draw upon it when it's necessary for you. So split complements are when you have one place on the color wheel, and then instead of going directly across, you go to the two hues on either side of it. So a split complement might be red, orange with green and blue, or you could go blue, green with orange and red. So that would be a split complement system. So this David Hockney is a really beautiful example of that right here. So green and blue with orange, red. Look, he's got that orange, red jacket on, and then green and blue in the image. And so there's a feeling of intensity as there was with the complementary system, but it's you're given a little bit more. And then this would also be a split complement system where you're working, the image isn't that great, but if I look in here, I'm working with yellow, orange. So let's find that on here, orange, yellow, and then blue and violet. So orange, yellow, blue, and violet. You can really see that as the dominant color system in this image. Okay, and then we have triads. Triads is a triangle. So a triad might be like all of the primaries, all of the secondaries, or, you know, tertiaries in a triangular formation. But if we look at the primary example, I always think of a triadic primary as being like, I don't know, a kindergarten classroom. It seems like it wouldn't be very subtle, shall we say? But look at these surprising ones here. This is soutine, carcass of beef. It's blue and red and yellow. Now the chroma has been modulated, but I would still say overall quite high saturation, but the value would be dark. So we've got dark value, high saturation, tetradic. No, triadic. I'm going to confuse you guys royally before the end of this. And then back to Wayne Thiebaud again, we've got yellow, red, and blue. But look at how sophisticated that is. Because he's changed the color quite a lot. We would still call that color on the side of the cake yellow, but it's not like yellow out of the tube, right? None of it is the color right out of the tube. So it's all been modulated. The chroma has been adjusted. Doesn't it make you want to eat cake? Makes me want to eat cake. And then an example by David Hockney of secondary triad. So we've got orange, green, and purple as the primary color system being used in this image. This is super gigantic. It's a mural, and you can see how it's tiled. It's 91 centimeters by 121 centimeters. It's big. I feel like it's meters and not centimeters. That would be not that big. It's meters. Yeah. Okay, then analogous color. So analogous color, if complements are like this, right? Complements are going against each other. It's being very exciting. Analogous color are three together on the color wheel. And this gives us a feeling of calmness. So let's look at a couple of examples. Fragonard, the reader, analogous. We've got red, we've got yellow, we've got orange. It's very calm, very warm. Georgia O'Keeffe, Purple Leaves. We've got red, blue, and purple in this image, but not red, a modulated red. But overall, we're talking about three colors next to each other on the color wheel. And then this Kirschner piece, which is green, violet, or green, blue, and violet. And these ones, these have a few bigger steps in between them. They're not like this on the color wheel. They're stepped like this, but it's still, so let me show you that on the diagram. So we're talking about violet, blue, and green. So there are steps apart, but it still gives us that feeling of being analogous. We're not getting a lot of tension between those things. But a really beautiful way for me, this Kirschner piece definitely feels like a particular time of day. Like I get evening from this piece because of the coloration. Okay, and this is it. Monochromatic, last one. If it's monochrome, you have one color plus white and black. So Kurt Kauper, Bobby 3, little tiny drawing. This is using one color, the color of Conte, Sanguine Conte, and light and a little bit of black Conte in areas like the eyes. So very, not a lot of push and pull, right? It's just slightly off being black and white. And then Philip Guston is another great one that worked very monochromatically for this whole series. I think I took out the next one. But he has this other painting called Smoking, Eating, and Sleeping. And it's like a cartoon figure in bed, smoking cigarettes and eating fried chicken. And it is also these kind of colors. So sort of Guston works in a way that's very muddy, but the pink becomes very dominant in his images because it's monochrome, right? Because he's just using red, black, and white. Okay, so if I wanted to think overall about color, I would say that color can be used in the following ways: to give spatial quality to the pictorial field. Okay, so that's fine. In order to give spatial quality, like I was talking about with that Bridget Riley stripe piece, the orange and blue one, I would say that if it is really pure chroma, high intensity, that's going to come forward. If you have put a lot of tint or shade into it, or you've neutralized the color, that's going to fall backwards. So the more neutral the color is, or the lower chroma the color is, it's going to fall backwards. But high intensity colors come forward. Color can supplement or even substitute for value difference to give plastic quality. So that's where we're talking about the face, and one side of the face being illuminated by cold light, the other side having warm shadow. So that gives us that sense of plastic three-dimensionality. Color can create interest through the counterbalance of backward and forward movement. We saw that with Bridget Riley. You can use color to create mood and symbolize ideas. For sure in that Kirschner cityscape, we saw that, definitely really moody. Color can be used to attract and direct attention as a means of giving organization to a composition. So what do I mean by that? Let's look back at this here. Our eyes are automatically drawn to this figure here because of the color difference, right? Everything else, if we took out that guy, this would be an analogous color scheme. Calm, really calm. And then we add that one guy in, whew, compositionally, we come straight over here. And then just to go back to the other lecture that I did on different compositional strategies, where's this guy standing? It's pretty close to the third. He's just over from the third. And this as well becomes, it's not half, it's more like a third. It's curious to watch these things and how they work. Okay. You can use color to accomplish aesthetic appeal by a system of well-ordered color relationships. So I talked about all of these different color systems: complementary, split complementary, analogous. It feels like a lot to remember, but the thing that becomes important is that if you're using color and you use a little bit of all of the colors, sometimes it can look super disorganized. I like to call it when the rainbow throws up on the painting or on the drawing. So you don't really want that unless you want that, and then go for it. But it can become overwhelming. So these color systems give us a sense of order, okay? And then you can also use color to identify objects by describing the superficial facts of their appearance. So that would be like the Rousseau painting of the bananas. Bananas are yellow, those are bananas, right? We identify with that one thing. Okay, so now we're going to transition to applying these color systems to a portrait. And I'm just going to stop sharing. I'm going to keep talking through this, and that way the assignment brief or the in-class assignment brief is also included on the video. So what I want you to do now is thinking about all this color information, thinking about the portrait that we drew together prior to this. I want you to create another portrait. I want you to use color, and I want you to think about making a kind of mask for yourself. So if you imagine that your portrait might have looked quite flat because of the nature of looking straight on, I want you to do another straight on portrait, but I want you to really play with color system and with subjective color in order to make a kind of mask for yourself. And you can think about how you want to interpret the idea of mask. So I might interpret the idea of mask as being the face that I want to put on to the world at a particular moment. So maybe I'm thinking about, I want to think about the mask I put on when I'm going into an important meeting. I'm going to be strong and confident with my mask. So what would be a strong, confident color system choice?
Primary?
I could use primary for sure. That would be strong and confident, sure. What else? That's a good one.
High intensity.
Something that's high intensity, yeah. I might use a complementary color system, kind of look vibrant and exciting. Maybe I don't want to look too vibrant and exciting though. Maybe that would make me look crazy. So now I'm going to like desaturate a little bit, but still be vibrant and exciting. And then what about a mask that I might wear if I wanted to like turn it off at the end of the day? What would be my mask for the end of the day? I need to calm down. I need to calm down and chill out. And I'm going to put on this mask. What would it be?
Complimentary or
Complimentary might be too exciting for end of the day.
Analogous.
Maybe
Analogous.
monochrome?
analogous?
Analogous or monochrome. Yeah, absolutely. So I could have an analogous, maybe I have like those warm tones like in that Fragonard painting, and I'm thinking about being warm and, you know, cozy by the fire, or maybe I'm going more towards the blue, green, purple kind of tones, thinking about end of the day, or maybe I'm going towards monochromatic and it's going to be like blues and whites and blacks. Okay. So I want you to work with drawing in proportion as we did earlier today, but I want you to work with using color in a subjective way that you're going to make a kind of mask for a particular occasion. What do you think? Are there questions about this?
Should we start off with graphite?
Yes,
as a
great.
draft?
Yeah, great question. So if you want to, in general, I like to start with the medium that I'm going to use for the rest of the drawing. But that being said, because I know that we're all, you know, learning about portraiture and how it works, you may want to start with a light graphite drawing underneath. The graphite will never fully integrate into the drawing, which is why I don't really recommend, you know, drawing in graphite and then putting the other thing over top. But in this case, I actually think it's most appropriate. So I wouldn't go with this drawing that I have created here and try to overlay, you know, this beauty. I wouldn't take this and now overlay color on top of it, because there's so much graphite. It just, the graphite and the pastel wouldn't really play together very nicely. For sure, get yourself established and then add in the color. Okay, I'm going to stop recording here.